Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Fitness Philosopher podcast. As always, it is I, your host, Adam Fisher. Today what we're going to be talking about is a topic that is very popular nowadays, and we'll get into why that is in a little bit. But this topic is, does cardio kill gains? Is cardio bad for increasing the size of your muscles as well as the strength that you can produce, the force that those muscles can produce? So this is a big one that this is a big myth that gets passed around the community a lot, in part because there are a lot of sort of T Nation articles or other, sort of lower end blogs and stuff like that that pass this stuff around as fact. And it's really big in sort of bodybuilding communities, where, bro science reigns supreme. And so the thing is that recently, or relatively recently, the floodgates opening happened when Alex Viada kind of came on the scene and started really writing articles for Juggernaut and stuff like that. And Alex Viada has a 600 plus squat, and pretty similarly impressive numbers on his other powerlifting lifts. But he's also has amazing endurance, and he regularly competes in both strength and endurance events. He does cycling races, he does runs, etc. And on top of that, he's like hella jacked, so that helps too. But the thing is that ever since then, there's been this huge interest in the topic, and that's become one of the new big things to talk about, and one of the new big things to spread around, and so on. And so the thing is that there's always been this glaring hole in that argument, in the argument that cardio kills gains. We do have research that says that there is an interference effect. So the interference effect is basically that when you take a high level of endurance activity and you combine it with a high level of strength activity or hypertrophy activity, what you typically see is that the strength or the hypertrophy training suffers. And that's well documented. No one is arguing against that. Now, the thing is that it's hard to reconcile that with other facts that we do know, like, for example, that there are some field sports that require a great deal of strength while also requiring a great deal of endurance. So, for example, you have American football players who have to be extremely strong, for tackling and so on, but they also have to be able to move up and down the field pretty quickly. They have to be able to kick, they have to be able to catch, they have to be able to throw. And so the thing is that there are plenty of football players who are hella strong and who are also really good at endurance stuff, and that's always been the case. That's the demands of the sport. It's never not been the case. So it's kind of surprising that we always had this argument, because of course people have just been making this argument for a while, for honestly as long as I've been training, as long as I've been on the internet. That's been an argument that's been passed around. And in one sense, you could say that it's mostly just aimed at bodybuilders, right? Because you can kind of see, like football players who might have a little bit higher body fat percentage, but are pretty muscular and are pretty good at moving, but they don't quite have the extremely lean, low body fat percentages that you typically see in bodybuilders. And that kind of might be where the argument sort of takes hold, as they see these football players and they say, oh, well, obviously the fact that they're doing cardio is what holds them back from actually getting to that extreme leanness. But the fact is that that's not the case. The reason that football players are not extremely lean is simply because it's not beneficial for them to be extremely lean. After a certain point, there's no additional benefit that your body gets out of being leaner, relative to the amount that you can perform within a set goal. So in general, like I said, the addition of endurance activities to strength training does have a net negative effect. However, there's two major confounding issues here. One is that this often happens in the short term. So if we were to look at things in the longer term, that might be a little bit different. And second is that when you actually control for it, we realize that it's not necessarily endurance training in general, just running. Running is the thing that has such a huge interference effect, and that makes sense. Running is extremely damaging to the joints. Running is high impact. Running, basically you're just slamming your feet into the ground constantly for 30 minutes to an hour at a time, and that means that you are compromising your recovery. If you're doing running, that's great. It's an awesome endurance activity, and it's in fact the single, most cardiovascularly challenging activity that there is. And that's amazing if you're looking to, build up your cardio. Now the problem with that is that since it is pretty stressful on the body, it requires a great deal of recovery to recover from, and that means that if you're doing it at the same time that you're doing lower body workouts, squat workouts for hypertrophy or for strength, then it will get in the way of that. It will interfere with that. But the thing is, that doesn't, that overlooks the fact that there are so many other types of endurance training that you can do. It overlooks the fact that if you simply structure your training a little bit differently, then you can absolutely get the same result. You can absolutely get the maximum benefit out of both. So the big problem is often not that cardio kills gains, it's that people have very inefficient training systems, and that's what's causing the issue. It's that they're trying to combine too many things at once. Very often people think, I'm going to do cardio, and so they take whatever high volume of training that they're doing for strength or for hypertrophy or whatever, and they just drop a high volume of endurance training on top. And that doesn't work, right? Because if you drop a high amount of volume on top of an existing high amount of volume, your body's going to suffer. Your body's going to be pretty beat up because it's not going to adjust very quickly. It's much smarter to add things in slowly, to progress slowly, to start off with a very low volume of endurance activity and to add that in over time, than to to just try and dump a huge amount on your body all at once. That's one of the big things that a lot of people do. It's one of the things that I did in the past, and it's unfortunately that's very often what happens. It just reduces your recovery, and then you're not seeing good results from either your endurance work or your hypertrophy or strength work. But again, if you add it in carefully and steadily, then you're not going to see any negative impact on your results. So in general, here are some basic rules to follow, and this mirrors what all kinds of strength and conditioning coaches have been saying for a while. This mirrors what Alex Viada says, and I do highly recommend checking out Alex Viada's book, The Hybrid Athlete, simply because it's an excellent book on how to combine this stuff. He's got lots of different training programs in the back that I actually myself run off of a template that they included in that book, and I modified it quite a bit, so it's very different now. But that is the basic template that I used in my training for quite a while, and it's absolutely worked well for me. But to go into some basic guidelines to follow. Some basic guidelines are, again, running is high impact, easily interferes with their training. So you should ideally be doing that in days on days that are not immediately before or after heavy leg days, because again, then that can compromise your recovery on those days. So if you want to do running, I recommend doing running on its own day, or you could combine it with some upper body work for that day. But whatever you do not want to do it immediately the same day or the day before or after a heavy leg day, simply again because that will interfere. Other methods that are not running have minimal impact and can be trained a lot more easily around your leg training. So that includes stuff like your elliptical. There's no impact involved because your feet are in contact with the machine the whole time. Cycling, same thing. Cycling is actually shown to also boost hypertrophy in the quads, which is your legs, the knee extension, quite a bit. So cycling is an excellent opportunity to do some cardio as well, even though it doesn't burn as many calories, doesn't really get your heart rate up as much. Sled work is great. Not everyone knows about sleds because most people train in commercial gym settings that probably don't have a sled. A sled is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a sled that you put weight plates on and you drag it. And that, again, since you're moving much slower, since you're not doing the fast, repetitive pounding movement that you typically see in running, again, there's a lot less impact than that. And it's a favorite among strength athletes and a favorite among strength and conditioning coaches, simply because it allows you to get quite a bit of strength effect in at the same time in terms of building strength in the legs, really challenging you, and you can add, more weight over time. Another one is just a high incline walk. So if you just dial up the incline on your treadmill and you go for a walk, if you dial up the incline all the way and you do the walk, you'll see that you are burning, you are getting a pretty good effect without even moving very fast at all. You don't even have to be moving more than, say 2 or maybe 3 miles an hour. Now the thing with that is, I do highly recommend that the number one thing that a lot of people do when they go on high incline walks like that is they will automatically try and grab for the guards, the handrails, whatever that you have on the treadmill, simply because they are not really used to that incline and it feels a little awkward for them. The problem with that is that when you do that, you're then fully leaning back and you're getting much less of an effect out of the incline because you're just not supporting your body upright the way you normally would be. So when you're doing that, again, I would say, don't try and hold on to the handrails. Another thing that I like to do to add some difficulty to your incline walk is to use a weight vest. Weight vests are pretty useful for body weight exercises, and this is no exception. So if you toss on a weight vest while you're doing a high incline walk, that's going to really, really get those legs burning. It's going to really get some cardio in for you. It's basically the same effect as like going hiking, while wearing a pretty big backpack. So that's also a great way to actually train for hiking in case you ever wanted to go hiking. I'm in Seattle, so I might want to go hiking. So we'll see. Also, the rower. The rower is more of an upper body cardiovascular effect, and it can be pretty punishing. The rower is it's also an amazing cardiovascular activity, and since it is upper body, you can combine it in pretty easily with your lower body strength stuff without any issue. But you may want to be a little more careful in combining it with your upper body strength or hypertrophy stuff. So yeah, all of these methods are much lower impact, and so you can actually do them pretty much anytime you want. You can do them after a heavy leg day. You could do them the day before or after a heavy leg day as well. You could do them pretty much whenever, and they're going to have minimum interference with your strength or hypertrophy. Another important suggestion is don't just do interval training. So interval training is extremely popular right now, and interval training does allow you to get kind of more of an effect in a shorter period of time, and that's what a lot of people jump to. But the thing is that interval training can also be much higher impact. It can be much harder to recover from. This is particularly the case when it comes to running. So again, running is pretty high impact, and sprinting is even higher impact than that. But you can also do stuff like bike sprints. You can do stuff like rower intervals. All of that is a great way to get intervals in. But again, I do recommend don't just do intervals. That's the thing, is because a lot of people hear, oh, intervals are great, and they do only intervals. And the problem with that is that you want a good kind of low intensity endurance, steady state sort of effect is what you're going for. And yeah, you are training anaerobic systems, which are more similar to the ones that you're using in heavy lifting with those kinds of interval training. But that's what you have lifting weights for. You need to be focusing on training your weak points here. That's kind of the whole point of doing cardio while you're focusing on something else. So you want to be focusing on your weak points instead of trying to do something that shores up your strong points in a slightly less effective way. So I do recommend that you do some interval training, but don't make that your only thing. Maybe do interval training once a week. Maybe do 1 or 2 sessions of steady state training throughout the rest of the week. But do not just do interval training. That's the big thing. So there is a documented effect in which long cardio sessions can cause catabolism, muscle wasting, and that's simply because of the massive energy demands required. So the way to get around that is to keep your cardio sessions shorter. I recommend around 20 minutes to start. There's no particular reason for that, but 20 minutes to start is kind of a good baseline for a lot of people. It's a shorter period of time, and it still allows you to get a good steady state training session in. About 45 minutes and longer is where you get to the point where it's maybe a little bit too much. And so starting from 20 minutes, you can it's easier to progress little by little from there, and still have plenty of room to progress in by adding more without having to get to that point at 45 minutes where it gets to be too long too quickly. Another thing is circuits and complexes. So that's when you're doing sort of weightlifting movements, machines, whatever, in a circuit succession in order to move quickly to provoke a cardiovascular effect while also getting in your weight training, your cardio and your weight training at the same time. The problem with that is that it's generally an inferior way to get cardio in. It's some cardio. It's not as good a cardio as you'll get from a real focused steady state training session. And so I do recommend them. They're useful. They have their purpose, but I wouldn't say, again, that they should be your primary cardiovascular training. I would say that maybe one of those per week, kind of along the same lines of the interval training, but you should have 1 or 2, steady state training sessions around that. Like with any training program, you need to use endurance training only when it's necessary. What happens a lot is when you go into on-season, when you're preparing for a competition as a powerlifter or a bodybuilder or a strongman or whatever, it would be best to cut out cardio simply because you are trying to get in peak shape. If you're a powerlifter and you're trying to peak for a competition, it's probably best to avoid endurance training for probably the 2 weeks to 1 month before your contest, so that you can be simply as specifically trained as possible, so that your body doesn't have any extra stuff to worry about. Another thing is, for example, bodybuilding. If you are doing a bulking phase, you're trying to gain weight, well, obviously extra cardio is not going to be helpful. So you might want to minimize your cardio, cut it down to 1 or 2 sessions a week total, simply so that you can have more, you can have more calories coming into your body. You're burning fewer calories so that you can, bulk a little easier. On the other hand, if you are cutting, you may need to add, quite a bit more cardio to help you cut, in addition, of course, to focusing on your diet, simply because that'll make it a little bit easier. So again, you need to consider, if you're training for a very specific goal, you need to think about how that endurance training, how that cardiovascular training fits in, rather than simply trying to do too much when that's counterproductive for your goals. And the last recommendation that I have, the most important recommendation, the one that so many people mess up on, is just progress slowly. Do not try to do too much too quickly. I would start off at 15 or 20 minutes to start, and then I would just add, say, 1 minute per session per week. If you're doing 2 or 3 cardio sessions per week, that's just 3 minutes per week extra, 2 or 3 minutes per week extra. And that's slow. Yeah, it's slow. It feels slow, absolutely. And it feels like you're not doing much more, but 10 weeks down the line, you're doing much more cardio. And since you've progressed slowly, it will have minimal effect on, the rest of your training. So that's the number one thing, is just progress slowly, take it easy, don't try to do too much at once, because that is the biggest, most common problem by far. Now, the interesting thing is that there is research which shows that concurrent training of endurance and hypertrophy or strength actually results in better results than just doing that hypertrophy or strength training alone. And there are plenty of reasons why that can be. For example, I earlier mentioned how cycling can cause hypertrophy in the quads. So if, for example, you are doing a certain amount of quad work and you add in cycling to that, well, that is more work for the quads. You're pedaling against resistance, so there is some amount of weight involved. And that basically just means more volume for the quads, which means that you could potentially, build up your quads more because you're using them more. It's the same with sort of, any kind of cardiovascular effect. Now, the problem, of course, is that very often hypertrophy does not happen when you're, doing these training methods like running, for example, simply because you are not combining it with weight training and simply because you're not focusing on bulking up. But these can induce a small amount of hypertrophy, and that certainly helps. Another thing is recovery. So the thing is that most people, you think of, say, for example, doing a 1 rep max deadlift. That is something that is extremely anaerobic. Your body, mostly uses anaerobic energy systems, which produce a lot of energy very quickly, but it's, very inefficient. It tires you out a lot, and then, you have to take quite a long time to recover after the activity. Now, the thing is, though, is that, while in a vacuum, you see that and you say, okay, well, all that matters is anaerobic activity, right? All that matters is anaerobic recovery, because if about 70% or 70 or 80% of the energy that is used in that 1 rep max deadlift comes from the anaerobic system, then you'd say, okay, that's all that's important. It doesn't the aerobic system doesn't matter. But the thing is, again, that's an example of it happening in a vacuum. So when you're not deadlifting in a vacuum, let's say that you're doing a set of 2, and then you're resting for a little bit to recover, you're doing another set of 2, then you're resting a little bit to recover, you're doing another set of 2. Well, what's actually happening is that during that first set of 2, it's mostly anaerobic, exactly like it happens in that vacuum that we were talking about a second ago. But in the 2 minutes or so between that first set and that second set, what do you think is doing the most at replenishing your energy? And it's not the anaerobic system, because of course there's no need for it anymore. You're not in that place where you're currently lifting a heavy weight. So your body knows, and it's focusing on the aerobic system instead of the anaerobic system to generate energy to recover. So during that 2 minutes of recovery, the aerobic system actually produces a much greater percentage of the recovery than the anaerobic system does. Now, let's say that you do that second set of deadlifts. Now, the second set of 2 deadlifts, your anaerobic system is pumping as hard as it can, it's doing as much as it can, but it's also burnt through some of the energy stores that it's already used up. So what's happening is that it's still producing the vast majority of the energy during that second set, but it's a little bit less than it was last time. So say maybe for the first time it contributes 80%, and maybe the second time it contributes 75%, or maybe a little bit more than that, 76, 77%. So it's still producing the most, but as you get more tired out, the aerobic system is producing more and more of the energy that's used during that single effort. And sure, after a certain point, your anaerobic system will be so taxed out that you simply can't lift heavier, that to that same intensity anymore. That's why after about 5 or 6 sets, you become so tired out that you might, miss reps because you simply can't keep doing it. Your body simply can't produce enough energy using the anaerobic system as quickly as it's needed. Now the thing is, of course, that means that over time the aerobic system is contributing more and more to the overall percentage of the energy that's being used, and that is simply because your anaerobic system is getting more and more tired out. Now what that means is that improving your aerobic system through cardiovascular training is going to mean better recovery times. And better recovery times means you can lift more weight. It means that you can get more sets in. It means that you're not going to be as tired out from your workouts. It means that between workouts you're going to recover quicker as well. Basically, having some kind of aerobic system, training in place. I mean, yeah, it's not going to directly increase your max deadlift. It's not going to. It's not going to add pounds to your deadlift. But what it's going to do is it's going to enable you to do more training. It's going to enable you to train harder, and that is what will add pounds to your deadlift. So it's an indirect effect, but it's still extremely important. And this is the #1 reason why I say that you can't simply train one quality. You can't simply train for strength. You can't simply train for hypertrophy. You cannot simply train for endurance. Because in order to be as best as you possibly can in any one of those 3 qualities, you do have to involve some amount of training for the other 2 qualities as well to maximize your results. So that is the main reason. That is the main reason why cardio can, over time, result in better results in terms of hypertrophy and strength. And that is why you should include cardio in your training program. Cardio does not kill gains, period. Poorly constructed programs will kill gains, but that's not cardio's fault. That's because you are trying to add in too much running on top of whatever else you're doing, and that's just that's a mistake. So I mean, this has become such a regular topic in the fitness industry. This is being passed around. I want to say every few months, every couple of months, there's another huge article about this, and I mean, yeah, we're all kind of getting tired of saying it, but yeah, cardio does not kill gains. I mean, I'm sorry that I had to be another person to say this, and I'm sorry that it has to be said, but it does have to be said because this is one of those myths that is refusing to die, or wants to stick around because it's been said so much up until now. So yeah, like I said, check out Alex Viada's work. It's Viada. I will include links to his stuff in the show notes. Check out Greg Knuckles' write-up on it as well. He had a pretty good one recently called Avoiding Cardio Could Be Holding You Back, and that is another excellent article in terms of just introducing the research and kind of giving you the lowdown on why it is that cardio is good for you. And he has probably my favorite infographic. He has an infographic that has on one, it's basically a table, and it says on one side benefits of aerobic training, and then it says on the other side how that carries over to strength training. And one of the benefits of aerobic training is a decreased risk of heart disease. And then he says that the reason that this carries over is, of course, that you cannot get jacked if you are dead. So yeah, that's about all there is to it. You can't get jacked if you're dead. Do your cardio. And I will talk to you guys again next time. Hi everyone, Adam here again. I really hope that you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Here at Philosopher Warrior, I am all about body positive fitness. To me, that means learning to be strong and healthy and happy in your body without having to worry about losing weight or fitting into societal standards of what beauty should be. If you like what I do here, I would absolutely love it if you could support me in any way possible. After all, making content is difficult, and making and editing a podcast can often take 5 or more hours just to get you guys a half hour of free content. So here are a few ways that you can do that thing. First, check out my blog at www.gains.af, that is GAINS.af, which is packed full of plenty more free posts for those of you who are more into reading words and stuff. You can also sign up for the mailing list. This means that you're getting alerted to all the newest content as it's released. Along with that, you get a free copy of the Gains ebook, which contains a 12-week program designed to help beginners get stronger, bigger, and more durable. The book also comes with a 12-week mailing program designed to educate you on many of the basic principles underlying good training. So it's great for beginners looking to learn a lot more about how to train as well. Second thing you can do, you can purchase my ebooks, also through www.gains.af. Aside from the free Gains ebook, you can also find my first ebook, The Uplift Method, which lays out my exercise philosophy and explores what I think about mind-body exercise and how it's crucial to any good exercise program, even though I have some, pretty big criticisms of it. For those interested in fantasy stuff, I'm also a huge fantasy nerd. I have a novella about vampires that I wrote a while back, and you should check that out. It is short, it is cheap, and it is awesome. Third and last thing you can do, you can support me with a small monthly donation through the Gains Patreon at www.patreon.com/gains. You can also find that through the gains.af site. At just $1 a month, you can get a copy of the Gains ebook and access to the Gains Facebook community. At $10, you get a copy of Uplift, again, that is the Uplift Method, as well. At $25, you get a t-shirt. At $60, you get access to semi-personalized group coaching. So I will be writing programs for you and a bunch of other people at the same time, and you get some other stuff with that as well. At $100, you can get fully customized individual coaching. That is right, I will write your programs for you and keep on you regularly to see how it's going via email or text. So, above all, if you like the content, please share. Let people know about the good news of intersectional body positive fitness and direct them our way. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. If you ever want to reach out to me, my email is ae.fisher.gains@gmail.com. If you want to hear about a particular topic, let me know. Reach out to me and I'll share what knowledge I have. Hey, guess what? You're awesome, and thank you.